This is Recovery Lifestyles with Carmel. Recovery Lifestyles is committed to raising awareness and ending stigmas surrounding addiction and mental health. On today's show, I'll be speaking with Rosie Bank, who is a board-certified Integrative nutrition health coach and the founder of Health Matters Coaching. She is also the founder of the Vitality Club at Trilogy in Brentwood. Rosie is the author of Health Matters. She is also an Advanced Rolfer, a Rolf Movement Teacher, and a graduate of the Iyengar Yoga Institute. Rosie has been leading classes in yoga, meditation, mindfulness, embodiment, and a variety of self-healing, self-soothing practices since the mid-1970s. Health Matters Coaching is a system that helps people fall in love with food that is good for them and to enjoy abundant, good health, peace, and confidence around nutrition. Rosie is an international speaker and the creator of the Health Matters podcast. She is an avid meditator, enthusiastic athlete, and devoted practitioner of yoga. As a practicing compassionate vegan, Rosie loves to prepare nutritious, gorgeous, and delicious food for friends and family. So hi, Rosie. Thank you so much for being here today. I'd like to share a little bit more about who you are and what it is you do.
Well, I consider that the most generous question, Carmel, because I've had this long embodied journey. I'm 66 years young, and since I was a kid, I've had this uniquely embodied life. There have been ups and downs, there have been some traumas, there have been some tragedies, and here I am, age 66, in the best health of my life, doing sports and yoga and travel and adventure travel, as well as when I was in my 20s. And that's my personal journey, and it's been reflected by my professional journey, because the only way I've ever worked in my entire adult life is helping people live more successfully through their bodies. I've done it through body therapy called Rolfing, a long and fabulous travel the world yoga career, teaching yoga, and I still practice, nutrition and health coaching. And I taught water skiing when I was a kid at summer camp, when I was a teenager.
Wow.
And that's my journey. I tallied the other day that I've been doing yoga. I think let me do a little math. I think I've been doing yoga for 56 years, or I might be off by a decade. But I started when I was 19. And I still practice.
Yeah. I mean, that's absolutely fascinating. I find you to be so inspiring at your age, to be in the best health that you've ever been. I mean,
at my youth.
At your youth.
At my youth, right.
Yes, I love that. Who is it? Dr. Christiane Northrup. She always says that. How many years young? And I actually have this little funny story quick. The other day, somebody was asking me how old I was. And when I told them 3 years younger than I really was. And my husband looked at me and he's like, no, you're not. And I realized that I cut myself off at that age.
Where did the 3 years go?
I'm like, I feel fantastic.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you for sharing that. So today, I mean, the reason I wanted to have you on Recovery Lifestyles, well, for many reasons, besides I find that you're absolutely fascinating, is that you have had a struggle and a recovery process with an eating disorder. And there are many women that view this show. And so I know that you will be an inspiration to them. Would you like to share more of that?
I'd be pleased to. I remember about approximately 10 years ago, I was in LA doing a certified speaker training academy. And the instructor, whose name is RV, that was her name, she had me get up on stage and share my story about bulimia. This is sign language for it lives in the past, Carmel. I teach my clients, we move things to the past. So the story I'm telling lives in the past. That's significant. Yes. I'll make a point about that. Okay.
Yes.
So RV.
It has no power.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
It has no power today.
I love that. So RV had me stand in front of the training room and tell my story about bulimia until I cried. Oh. And later she explained to me, she said, in order to serve other people, you have to get the story out, even though I still didn't have my head in the toilet. that was in the past, I really credit her with encouraging me, forcing me in an appropriate way to get my story out. And that was a breakthrough moment for me because I can now talk about it. It's part of the narrative when I work with my clients. I love what you said, it has no power. And one of the things that you and I can talk about is how we reference literally the language energy we use when we refer to our struggles. Because I think, and this was true for me back 30 years ago when I was really just totally destroying my body. I had a life-threatening eating disorder. But one of the things that people do that I did, so I recognize it in others, is we give so much energy around our struggles. We pad it with emotions and stories, and we drag it around and we focus on it. And that's where I was for my 20s and my late teens, all of my 20s, and into my 30s. It was devastating. I lived with shame, blame, self-loathing, self-recrimination, so much fear, so much humiliation. And you didn't ask me why that's not part of my reality anymore, but I still look at learning to put distance between me and that behavior as among the most transformational journeys of my life.
Yeah, I mean, and going back to that, there is so much power in sharing your story, but being in a place of sharing it without any emotion, with this is who I was, this is not who I am anymore. And I now can inspire you to have the courage to share your story in a place of power. So actually, I don't mean to be argumentative, but it does have emotion to it. It has emotions of gratitude, compassion, relief, gratitude, compassion, and relief. So I never thought of it this way because you bring out the thoughtfulness in me, but the emotions have migrated, evolved over the years. I told you how I used to feel, and I was doing a seminar a few years ago, and I realized, oh my God, I had to have gone through that. I had to have gone through that in order for me to serve people. In fact, that's part of my story, as you read in my origin story, which is I was forced to get my act together because I was living with a dual reality that there was no more room for it. Part of me was my experience. I won't curse on your show, but I felt I was completely effed up. Yeah.
That was the word that I used to describe myself. And I also knew that I was born with a talent or a gift or a desire, whatever you want to call it, to work in the healing capacity. And as long as I kept purging and binging and destroying my body and living with that self-loathing, there was a cap on what I could do for people. And Carmel, I had to pick. So we can make this about your audience today, your followers, your fans, the people who need to hear this, which is there may come a point where choosing the life that you must live can provide the fabric of a breakthrough.
I love that.
Yeah, I do too. And that was my experience.
So I want to just back up a little bit and talk a little bit more about, the bulimia and the eating disorder. And maybe, because maybe there's somebody listening that is struggling a little, but they're not really sure if they're really in a place where it's becoming dangerous for themselves. And so what are the signs and symptoms of an eating disorder?
Oh my gosh, what a great question. Well, like I shared with you yesterday, it's a continuum. Not everybody who stuffs themselves ends up purging. Not everybody who feels a food coma or feels bloated may have an eating disorder. It's more of a continuum, Carmel, than blocks. And your question was your question, what are the symptoms or how does one recognize it? How does one recognize it within themselves that they've gone to maybe a dangerous place?
Gotcha. Okay. Patterns.
Okay. So I think that there is an experience whether one is aware of it, whether one is naming it or not. I think there's an experience when one is destroying one's body, that if one is willing to say, wow, this can't be right. This can't be right that I obsess over food, that I walk into a party and I'm filled with anxiety, that I can't stay present in my life because all I want to do is go home and eat a pint of ice cream. The degree to which, and we're talking about this particular substance called food, and for most people in particular, it's processed carbohydrates. Sidebar, processed carbohydrates do something in our brains that reinforces the addictive cycle. It has to do with neurotransmitters and chemicals from the brain and the pleasure centers in the brain and all that. So most people who are hooked struggle with copious amounts of processed carbohydrates. I think one can look around and say, wow, if I really were to be honest, the amount of real estate, virtual real estate in my life that's allocated to food and recovery and obsession and preoccupation, I think one has to look around and be really honest with oneself, Carmel. Now, one more thing. Having said that, I think it's possible for people to have a major case of denial and a willingness to not look. I mean, you and I both know people who say, no, everything's fine. Yeah. But I think taking a look can be incredibly difficult, incredibly painful, and essential to have a breakthrough. So what we're talking about is the willingness to be honest with one's situation.
Well, and leading into my next question, with you saying all of that, what about the situation where, and I've seen this a lot, where people know they have a problem, specifically to the carbohydrates, and so they cut that whole food out, but they're still obsessing. They're still going crazy. They say, I can't eat this because it makes me like this.
Right. Did you see me flinch just then?
I did.
I did. Okay, let me tell you why I flinched. I flinched because it is so sad. I flinched. That was my compassion. That was my compassionate flinch. That was I hurt for that person.
Yeah.
One of my clients told me yesterday that she's good with one glass of wine, and if she has two or more, it turns into a binge. It has to do with how her body metabolizes alcohol sugar. And Carmel, the reason why I flinched is that is a huge red flag. If somebody has demonized a major macronutrient food group, that person has a lot of homework to do.
Yeah.
Let me, like an analogy. Let's say somebody wants to drive her car, and I'm making this up. This might not even be a good analogy, but she's deathly afraid of being within 5 blocks of some neighborhood where there was a trauma. All right, and she can't deal with having to do errands in this area because of this unresolved fear. It's an okay analogy. My point is, for anyone who has, it's called, well, I'm not going to get into the psychological term, but for anybody who has a debilitating fear about a major macronutrient, that person either needs help or healing or a health coach or read a lot of books on the subject, because that is a huge piece of unfinished business.
Yeah. I find that in today's society as well, there's so much information out there. And I know I've done this as well, so I can speak my truth into this, is that we've decided that we're allergic to something, or we've went out and binged, and we've ate so much of, say, wheat, that now we've decided, well, we're going to be like a celiac and just say we're allergic to it. We can't touch it. How do you break that cycle? I mean, do you feel that that's just another crutch to what we were just speaking of? That
I feel like it's another imbalance. Pretending one is celiac because one can't control oneself around wheat.
Yeah.
This goes back to your previous question. What are the symptoms? If somebody has a debilitating fear, what was the word used at the beginning of our conversation? If one gives power, if one gives power to wheat, or if one gives power to sugar, one is not as far along on one's evolutionary journey as one could be. I remember a client a few years ago told me that there is no root beer float that he can resist. And we did an exercise where I had him visualize a root beer float. And I asked him what it was about it. And at the end of the exercise, what he realized was it was just a form of sugar. That's all it was. It was his coveted form of sugar. We did an exercise where we had his power center. Mm-hmm. We did, the visualization where you make a video in your mind.
Yes.
So we did a visualization where his power center got greater and the root beer float got smaller. And he basically, in his words, I don't normally use the F word so much, but but in his words, Carmel, he had to say F you to sugar. He just had to say like F you to sugar.
Yeah.
Like quit bugging me, and I'm getting a divorce from you. Like screw you. I mean, and everybody is different.
Yeah.
Because the way we internalize our struggle, the mechanisms inside our personal history, the traumas we've had. My sisters and I all suffered from raging, debilitating bulimia because in my household, my mother's household, food was a nightmare. So that was my map. Somebody else might have a different map. So the particular ways that somebody learns to forgive, let go, love oneself, the core theme of Health Matters Coaching is to love our bodies and get our bodies to love us back. That is one of the two core emblems. The other one is fall in love with food that's good for you. So when people start chipping away at that and having their heads come up out of the water, it might be the toilet bowl. The particular ways that people do it are unique, like their thumbprint, because it depends what their woundedness is. It depends what happened when they formed the thoughts, when they went to those poor adaptive mechanisms, when they began to use the tool called bulimia to bring either relief from their pain or to bury their emotions or to prove something that they need to take control of their lives. When you really get into it, it's as fine as a signature, even though some of the breakthrough strategies have many of the same mechanisms. We're all so exquisitely unique in what happened.
That you just explained where I was going to go next was that is trauma and the eating disorder related? I know for myself in early recovery from drugs and alcohol, which then led to food and an eating disorder, that I used to deny. And I think that was part of my upbringing, was that we were always were expected to believe that things were better than they were. They were not realistically happening. So I found in the beginning of recovery, I was like, no, trauma from childhood cannot be related to this. But in your line of work, are you finding that just the two seem to go hand in hand every time? Or is there, go ahead.
So is the question, could trauma that happened, past tense, be correlated with maladaptive, destructive behaviors in present time?
Yes.
Oh my God. Without a doubt.
Okay.
Without a doubt. These self-destructive behaviors don't come out of nowhere. That's probably a good summary and answer to your question. They're clues, Carmel. They're always clues. And those clues, while it's on my mind, let me make an analogy for you.
Sure.
Those clues go back to something that happened, at which point we probably made decisions. And the trauma in my mother's household was food makes you fat. Don't eat that. You look fat. Don't eat that. And so I developed a fear of food. And so when my sisters and I discovered, oh my God, we can basically eat all this food and not get fat, what we didn't know is it would become so devastatingly debilitating and addictive. We didn't know that. So we dug a trap for ourselves. But here's my point. Those breadcrumbs go back. I can go back to what happened to my mother's household. As we heal, as we forgive, as we learn to look in the mirror and say, well, you know, my ass looks great, or my thighs look great, or learning to say nice things about ourselves, or learning to breathe during a meal so that we feel more relaxation and we gently tamp down the fear. We'll get into strategies perhaps during this call, but here's my point. As we heal, what we do is we literally leave the trauma behind us. So one of my clients yesterday said that for the last 3 weeks, she has chosen, we figured out that one of the things for her to do was to give up diet soda. And I'm not going to why. She's done that for 3 weeks, and the diarrhea has gone away and the bloating has gone away. And she goes, I'm free, I'm great. And I said, that's awesome. However, 3 weeks is right here. 3 weeks is not 20 years ago. Like, you can look over your shoulder, and 3 weeks, it's not quite last night, but 3 weeks is fairly recent in time. So my work with her and my conversation with you is to teach people to keep healing our bodies, to keep loving our bodies, to keep breathing through a meal, to do some meditation before going to a buffet so it's not a train wreck, to have positive self-talk, and more, by the way, so that the distance between our present selves and what happened, we put literal time, distance, so that now, Carmel, if I were to look back and try to find that bulimia, I can't even see it.
Yeah.
I can't even see it. It doesn't live in my psychic, emotional, psychological, spiritual, physical being. And that's what healing is. Healing is just like you said, where these things that happened that used to be traumatic no longer have power. And I pointed out that chronological time is a tool for making that be very real.
So I have a question for you. Now, with that time and with that healing, if say your example, this lady, I can't remember if it was a lady or a man, was to have a Diet Coke. Say it's been 5-6 years and they just occasionally have a Diet Coke. Is that going to trigger things to go back?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. It may or may not. That's a really good question. Yeah. There's a deeper question right next to what you just asked.
Okay.
Which is, how do people navigate in the real world when their substance is food, and you can't, unlike drugs and alcohol, you can't go cold turkey. That's what makes food as a substance so, like, it. When I think about navigating food, and you can't give it up like alcohol and drugs, it feels like my mind explodes, because learning to navigate food without giving it up that's why it's transformational. So she may or may not. I personally feel that people who struggle with carbohydrates may need to say, all right, I have to give them up. I don't believe that I can have just one cookie. Mm-hmm. I don't believe that I can. Okay, so let's find ways for you to get what you need from your brain other than sugar, which is why I teach my clients what I call self-soothing, self-nurturing activities. It is a huge component of Health Matters coaching. Ways to soothe yourself, ways to calm yourself, ways to pleasure yourself. I don't mean sex, but well, including sex, but not all mean sex. Ways to make yourself feel good. That are, I'll borrow a word from Brene Brown, that are wholesome.
Mm.
And in that endeavor to find ways to soothe and calm and pleasure and make ourselves feel good, the destructive relationship with sugar goes like this.
Yeah.
It recedes. Or maybe it's more accurate to say like this. It recedes. And then we wake up one day and wow, we want some blueberries, and we want some blueberries for breakfast or a green drink. And it's no longer about, oh my God, I'm going to eat the whole box of cereal. It recedes.
Yeah.
And then in that transition, someday somebody may have one Diet Coke, or even better, because I have strong feelings about artificial flavorings, artificial sweeteners. Even better, Carmel, they may decide that artificially sweetened Coke does not meet their new evolved high standards.
I love that. Yeah. Because I know in my own experience and what I've seen with even women that I've worked with is that they may go and find, say it's gluten is the problem, but then they start buying all the processed gluten-free items and they're still getting, I think, that sugar. They're still, right? So they're replacing. So it's very, I feel like my word of the day is powerful, but it's very powerful with what you're saying is there's a big difference between that sugary cookie and a blueberry, right?
Well, the mechanisms that drive our desires go back to our brains.
Mm-hmm.
And they go back to our nervous system. Which branch of the autonomic nervous system is being activated, parasympathetic or the sympathetic? If we're in a stress state, which is a sympathetic nervous system, we crave carbohydrates.
Mm-hmm.
I know not to go too far into this. If we're in a peaceful state, parasympathetic nervous system, we've done self-soothing activities, we're well rested, we're breathing, we feel relaxed, we're more inclined to want a veggie burger.
Right.
And that's where you go from these self-soothing activities and make a direct correlation to food choices and being able to hear that our bodies want our bodies are seeking wholesome choices. And I have tears behind my eyes now when I think about how blessed a person is to do the hard work to get to that place, and it is nothing short of transformational.
Mm. So as we're about to wrap up, I think you've already said it, but if there's anything on your heart that you would really like to share. I will. One thing.
So my daughter's a gorgeous, stunning woman. She'll be 31 this year. And she keeps me checked. She says that I can't use the word fat in my blogs because it's too loaded of a word.
Yeah.
And so I posted this blog called How to Travel and Not Get Fat. And she said, Mom, so I rewrote it and I said, How to Travel and Not Put on Extra Pounds. So I'm very sensitive to the universe these days where we don't want to fat shame, we don't want to body shame, we don't want to make people feel bad about their bodies. And I really, really get that. I love how I look. I love how I feel. It took me a very long time to get here. But here's the thing, Carmel, and this brings tears to my eyes and a feeling in my heart that I get that people have different sizes and shapes. I get the whole big, beautiful woman concept and, these beautiful, large women on Instagram. I get it. I get it deep in my soul that we don't have to all be the same size and shape. But for anyone who is sabotaging one's body, feeling insane around food, feeling wretched, feeling powerless, not being able to stop that one ice cream sandwich becomes a box of ice cream sandwiches. That is tragic. And for that person, she is not living her best life. And I just love the tender distinction between, I want to hold that pain tenderly in my hands. At the same time, we love who she is. We love her shape and size. We accept that we're not all the same shape and size. Mm-hmm. But for someone, and I know that you are an emissary of personal development and personal growth and empowering people, for that woman, for that person. Let's hold how you are with yourself when you're alone, how you are, the truth about how you are around food, and nurture that and heal that part of you. Because that's when life can be lived at a whole new level. Like, what doors would open for a person when they basically go from destroying their bodies, often privately, often always shamefully, to freedom. And that's why I had to go through bulimia, to help people do that.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Rosie. And I just trust that everyone who is supposed to hear this message will. And if someone out there listening is really resonating with what you're saying, how can they find you?
healthmatterscoaching.com.
Okay. And I'll also have that link under our video. Okay. So if anyone wants to reach out, because I honestly feel that by you and I doing this today, we're going to be able to touch so many, because this is such a huge, especially with the whole Instagram world, this is such a huge topic now. And so many are struggling in private. And shamefully. Yeah. So thank you so much for being here today, Rosie.
It's a joy. It's a pleasure. And thank you, Carmel, because I love what you're doing, and being part of your messaging is a real honor for me.